You have known for a long time that they were a narcissist. You have read enough articles, watched enough videos. You can explain love bombing, trauma bonding, and gaslighting to other people flawlessly, but you still cannot let go. Not because you do not understand, but because one question still remains quietly burning, refusing to disappear. After losing you, are they really okay? You are not asking because you want them back. You are asking because you gave too much years of your life, your patience, a kind of love that you know not everyone is capable of giving. And a part of you needs to know that all of it did not simply vanish into nothingness, that you left some kind of mark, even a small one. Carl Jung once made an observation that few people mention when talking about this type of person. He said that there are people who cannot truly see themselves, not because they are unintelligent, but because there is a darkness inside them that they have learned never to look at directly. And in order to survive, they need other people to act as mirrors, reflecting back to them the feeling that they have value, that they are real, that they are worthy of love. An empath is the clearest mirror they have ever had. Because an empath does not look at others through the lens of judgment. An empath sees even the darkest, messiest, most contradictory parts of a person and still stays. To a narcissist, that is not just love. It is the only thing that makes them feel whole. When you leave, you do not just take away the love. You take away the mirror, and the darkness they have spent their entire life avoiding suddenly has nowhere left to hide. Modern psychology calls what happens next a narcissistic collapse. Not a collapse in the way you can easily see. They still post photos, still smile, still appear to move on. But internally, there are 6 stages unfolding, in almost the exact same order, again and again, in nearly every case. I do not want you to watch this video so you can feel satisfied seeing them suffer. Not because what they did to you was not painful enough, but because that satisfaction will not set you free. What I want is this. After understanding these 6 stages, you look back at the entire story one final time. You see clearly what truly happened. To them, to you, to the relationship you tried to hold together with everything you had, and then let go. Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve freedom. Stage 1. The anger, the thing that looks like love, but isn't. They call you at 2 in the morning, or send message after message, sometimes so sweet it feels frightening, sometimes so cruel you have to reread them twice to believe they are real, sometimes both within the same conversation, less than 5 minutes apart. Or they write long paragraphs about memories, about what they miss, about how you changed their life in ways nobody else ever could. And you read those things and wonder, if they do not love me, why are they doing this? That is the most dangerous question in this stage. Not because the answer is difficult, but because the real answer is the one you do not want to believe. In developmental psychology, there is a concept called object constancy, the ability to love someone and continue holding that love even when the other person is not here, even when you are angry, even when you are rejected. Emotionally mature people have that ability. Their love does not depend on constant presence, does not fluctuate from moment to moment, does not disappear simply because their needs are not being met. A narcissist does not have that ability, not because they feel nothing, but because what they feel does not operate through that mechanism. You are something they need, like a mirror, like constant proof that they exist, that they have value, that they deserve admiration. Carl Jung described this as the absence of an individuated self, a self that never truly separated from the need for external validation. When you leave, they do not lose a partner. They lose the only mirror patient enough to stay and reflect back the image they need to see. And this is where everything becomes confusing, because when someone loses the thing they depend on to survive, their reaction looks very much like love. Desperation looks like longing. Panic looks like an inability to let go. The messages at 2 in the morning look like someone struggling not to lose the person they love. But underneath all those forms, only one thing is operating: anger. Anger that you dared to leave before they did. That anger does not have only one face. It shapeshifts, And this is what makes it dangerous, because every form triggers a different reaction. Some people receive explosive anger, floods of messages, accusations you never imagined hearing, words designed with surgical precision to strike your deepest wound. Not because they are hurting and cannot control themselves, but because they know exactly what you are sensitive to, and they use it as a weapon. You feel guilty. You wonder if you were too harsh, and sometimes you go back simply to make the anger stop. Some people receive cold anger, complete silence, being blocked without explanation, erased from everywhere, as though you never existed. And paradoxically, that silence hurts more than cruelty, because it triggers the empath's deepest fear, that they are not worthy of explanation, not worthy of being treated like a human being. You start wondering what you did wrong. And sometimes, you are the one who reaches out first, just to hear an answer. Some people receive anger disguised as pain. They cry. They talk about childhood wounds. They say you are the only person who ever understood them, and that they do not know what they will become if you leave. This is the most subtle form, because it targets the empath's instinct to heal. You no longer see someone who is angry. You see someone who needs to be saved. And empaths do not walk away from people who need saving. 3 forms. 1 source. The same goal pulling you back into their orbit. But if you look carefully at everything they say, write, and do during this stage, you will notice one small detail people often overlook. How much of it is about you, about your feelings, about what you are going through, about whether you are okay, and how much of it is about them, about what they lost, what they feel, what they need from you. Real love, even when it hurts, even when it is angry, still sees the other person. It asks, "Are you okay?" before saying, "I am hurting." It respects your decision, even when that decision breaks them apart. What is happening here cannot do that, because what is happening here is not love. It is the panic of someone who just lost their only mirror and is doing everything possible to get it back. You mattered to them. That part is true, just not in the way you deserve to be loved, and understanding that difference is what keeps you from being pulled back by any form of that anger. Stage 2. Panic beneath the surface. After the anger, there comes a strange moment. They stop. The messages become less frequent, or the rage suddenly disappears. And from the outside, it looks as though they have accepted it. Let go. Moved on. You exhale in relief. You think finally, it is over, but it is not. What exists inside them at this point is not peace. It is panic, real panic, simply hidden beneath a mask they have spent their entire life learning to maintain. To understand why, you need to understand a concept psychology calls narcissistic supply, the emotional fuel a narcissist depends on to maintain their sense of self. Not love in the sense of mutual giving and receiving, but continuous external validation, admiration, submission, the presence of people willing to place them at the center. Without that supply, the ego structure they have built, all the confidence, the arrogance, the appearance of not needing anyone begins to shake from within. Heinz Kohut, who devoted his career to studying narcissism, described this with a very specific image. He said the narcissist's ego is like a building constructed without foundations, magnificent from the outside, but entirely dependent on external pillars to remain standing. When one pillar is removed, the entire structure begins to tilt, and an empath, with all their patience and unconditional love, is not merely one pillar, they are the main support beam. When you leave, that building begins to lean, and their first reaction is not to rebuild the foundation. Their first reaction is to find a replacement pillar as quickly as possible. This is why many people see a narcissist with someone new after only weeks, sometimes days. Not because they have truly moved on, not because they were unaffected, but because they are panicking. And the new person is not a choice, they are a life raft. But there is one important detail people often overlook. The replacement never truly fills the space you left behind. Not because you are more special than anyone else, but because an empath gives in a fundamentally different way. An empath does not merely admire them. An empath sees even their darkest parts and still stays. That is extraordinarily rare. And deep down, even if they never admit it, they know that. That panic manifests in very specific ways, and just like the anger in stage 1, it does not wear only one face. Some people see the narcissist suddenly reinvent their entire external image, changing styles, appearing constantly on social media, posting carefully calculated photos meant to send one message: I am fine. I am thriving. I do not need you. But that performance is not peace. It is the performance of someone who desperately needs others to confirm they are okay, because they themselves cannot yet believe it. Some people see them throw themselves into work, new projects, social circles denser than ever before, as though they are running from something. And in truth, they are. Because silence, solitude, the empty space where nobody is there to fill the void, that is where the darkness they have spent their entire life avoiding is waiting for them, and they will do almost anything to avoid standing still long enough to hear it. Some people see them become stranger, impulsive decisions, behavior inconsistent with the person you once knew, sudden bursts of anger toward people around them. This is the clearest sign of panic beneath the surface, when the structure of control begins to crack. The things normally kept hidden start leaking out in ways they can no longer fully contain. What matters in this stage is not how much they are suffering. What matters is understanding why you are still affected by what you see, even after leaving. Because an empath is built to read emotions, to sense pain beneath appearances. And when you see that panic, no matter how carefully hidden part of you wants to respond the way you always have, step in, stabilize them, make the emptiness quieter. But this is what you must remember. That emptiness was never your responsibility to fill. It never was. And if you step back in this time, you will not be stepping in to save them. You will be stepping in to become the support beam once again, inside a building that still has no foundation, and that will eventually begin to collapse in exactly the same way it did before. Stage 3. The smear campaign, when the story gets rewritten. Sigmund Freud once asked a question very early in his career. Why do people lie even when it is unnecessary? Not lying to gain something, not lying to escape consequences, but lying naturally, almost reflexively, as though there were no other option. The answer he found was not about morality, it was about psychological survival. He called the mechanism projection. When a person cannot face the darker parts within themselves, they do not process them. They push them outward, project them onto someone else, and then believe the new story as though it were true, because for their psyche, that is the only way to continue existing without collapsing. After losing the empath, the narcissist is standing in front of a truth they cannot accept. They treated someone who loved them in a way that left that person with no choice but to leave. To look directly at that truth would mean looking directly into the darkness they have spent their entire life avoiding, and their psyche will not allow that to happen. So the story gets rewritten. Quickly, naturally, without conscious planning. In the new version, you are the problem. You are unstable, controlling, too sensitive. You are the reason everything failed. And they tried their best, tolerated so much, but eventually could not continue with someone like you. That story is told in different ways depending on the person and the situation. Some say it openly to mutual friends, ordinary conversations suddenly becoming storytelling sessions about you. Some whisper it one person at a time, slowly enough that nobody notices the pattern, but widely enough that the narrative spreads before you even realize it. Others choose subtler methods, vague social media posts, indirect comments, sentences crafted carefully enough for insiders to understand, but never specific enough to be challenged directly. Different forms, but always the same goal: control the narrative before you can tell your version, and build a new network of validation to replace the space you left behind. The hardest part of this stage is not hearing those things. It is the urge to correct them, to explain, to defend yourself, to make people understand what really happened. The feeling that if you stay silent, you are allowing a false story about you to exist and spread. But a smear campaign only has power when you participate in it. Every time you explain, argue, defend, or try to prove yourself, you are pouring energy into a battle designed for you to lose, while simultaneously pulling yourself back into the exact orbit they want you to remain in. The people who truly know you will not need an explanation, and the people who do not believe you will not suddenly change, no matter how much you say. Silence is not defeat. Sometimes it is the only way to leave while still keeping yourself intact. Stage 4. Hoovering why you know it's a trap, yet still fall into it. You have already read about hoovering. You know what it is. You can probably even explain it to other people that it is a tactic, that they have not truly changed, that this is simply the cycle beginning again from the start. You know all of that. And then they send a message, and you read it, and something inside your chest, something you thought had already closed, begins to open again. You do not understand why. You hate yourself for feeling that way. You wonder if something is wrong with you for knowing the truth and still reacting like this. The answer is not about willpower. It is not about whether you are intelligent enough. It is about the way the human brain is programmed to process emotional danger, and this is the part most videos about this subject never fully explain. When you stay in a relationship with a narcissist long enough, your nervous system stops responding in normal ways. The moments of tension, the moments when warmth is withdrawn and then suddenly given back, your body learns to read those experiences as survival signals. Not metaphorically, biologically. Cortisol rises during conflict. Dopamine rises during reconciliation. And your brain begins associating that person with both of the most intense emotional extremes it knows. That is why when they return, even when you know this is a trap, your brain does not process the situation through logic. It processes it through body memory. And body memory does not read psychology books. But there is something even deeper than biology, something few people are willing to say directly. An empath does not only love the person. An empath loves the person's potential, the version they occasionally glimpsed, the rare moments when that person was truly present, truly saw you, truly became the person you believed they were capable of becoming. And when they come back during the hoovering stage, they do not return as their ordinary self. They return as exactly that version. The version you fell in love with from the beginning. That is not accidental. They know, even if unconsciously, that this is the only version of themselves still capable of pulling you back in. So how do you avoid falling for it when your brain is working against you and your heart is recognizing the very person it once loved? Not by shutting your emotions off, not by repeatedly reminding yourself that this is a trap. You already know that, and repeating it changes nothing. You do it by asking the right question. Not, have they truly changed? But, has their pattern of behavior changed, and for how long? The emotions may be real. The words may be sincere. But patterns do not lie. And patterns require time to prove themselves, not a message sent at 2 in the morning, not a tearful conversation, not an apology, no matter how genuine it sounds. Stage 5. Collapse or reinvention. By this stage, one of two things happens. There is no third option. If hoovering fails, if you do not return, if the replacement supply is not enough, if all the defense mechanisms they once relied on begin to stop working, the narcissist falls into what psychology calls a true narcissistic collapse. Collapse you can easily observe. But the internal one, when the entire ego structure they have spent a lifetime building can no longer hold itself upright. Heinz Kohut described that moment as the point where the grandiose self, the magnificent identity, the narcissist carefully constructed as emotional armor becomes pierced, and beneath that armor is not strength. From long ago, the person who was never healed, the one who learned to survive by never directly facing their own wounds. Collapse does not look the way people imagine. It is not dramatic phone calls filled with tears. It is not confession or accountability. Collapse looks like withdrawal, disappearing from familiar social circles, becoming more unpredictable, reacting with disproportionate anger over small things, making impulsive decisions that confuse everyone around them. Fall into depression without even knowing how to name it. Some begin abusing anything that helps them avoid sitting alone with themselves. Work, alcohol, screens, anything loud enough to drown out the silence inside. But no matter how it appears externally, the source is always the same. The darkness they have spent their entire life avoiding is finally knocking at the door. And this time, there is nobody standing between them and that darkness anymore. The second possibility, and this is far more common than most people realize, is reinvention. Instead of confronting the darkness, they construct an entirely new identity, a new style, a new social circle, sometimes even a new city. They reappear with a fresh narrative about themselves, someone who has been through so much, learned so much, matured so much, and the new people around them know nothing about the previous version, so they believe it. From the outside, reinvention can look like healing, but Carl Jung would have called it a persona shift, changing the mask, not changing the person underneath, because underneath, the same mechanisms are still operating. The same emotional needs still exist. The same kind of person will still be sought out to fill the same emptiness. The only difference is the newer clothes and the more polished story. And this is what both paths ultimately share: the most important thing to understand in this stage. Neither collapse nor reinvention is true healing. Collapse is forced confrontation without the emotional tools to process it. Reinvention is avoidance disguised as progress. Neither path leads to genuine transformation, because genuine transformation requires something narcissism, by definition, struggles to allow: the ability to sit still with the truth about oneself, without escaping, without blaming, without building another layer of armor. And that cannot come from you staying. It cannot come from you returning. It can only come from within them, if it ever comes at all. Stage 6. The obsession that never fully dies. His is a stage no one talks about directly, not because it doesn't happen, but because saying it would sound like giving the viewer a reason to hope, and that's not something I want you to carry with you after this video. But the truth is the truth, and you deserve to hear it in full. 1 year later, 3 years later, they're in a new relationship, may have completely reinvented themselves, may seem to be living better than ever, and you're still in their head. Not because they love you in the way you understand love, but because you left something that very few people leave: a mark of awareness. You're the one who saw them for who they truly were, even their darkest parts, and still chose to stay. For someone who never felt good enough to be seen, that's not an ordinary memory. That's something the human brain doesn't know how to erase. Cognitive psychology has a concept called the Zeigarnik Effect. The brain's tendency to remember unfinished tasks more deeply and for longer than completed ones. Bluma Zeigarnik, a Soviet psychologist, discovered this in the 1920s while observing restaurant servers. They accurately remembered unpaid orders, but almost immediately forgot completed ones. For narcissists, the relationship with the empath never truly finishes in their brains because it ends in a way they can't control, can't process, without closure in any sense their psyche can accept. And that unclosed thing just stays there smoldering, refusing to die down, appearing at the most unexpected times. Its manifestation isn't what you imagine. They don't sit remembering you every night. They don't suffer alone in the dark. It's more subtle and therefore harder to recognize. They compare the new person to you, even without saying it. They set standards for the next relationship that are inadvertently or intentionally measured by you. They react unusually when they accidentally hear your name, when they see something that reminds them of you, when someone casually mentions you in conversation. There are people who years later still check your social media, not to reconnect, just to look, as if needing confirmation that you're still there even though they're no longer a part of your life. And this is what I really want you to hear, not to gloat, not to feel like you've won a battle. Knowing this doesn't mean you should wait. It doesn't mean there's something unresolved between you two. It doesn't mean they'll change, come back, or become the person you once hoped they could be. It means only one thing: you are real. What you gave was real, and the mark you left on their lives, though they were never mature enough to acknowledge it, is proof of that. You don't need their confirmation anymore. You just confirmed it for yourself by understanding everything that happened, looking it straight in the face without avoidance, and choosing to move forward. That's something they, with all the stages they've been through, still haven't been able to do. 6 stages. One loop. And now you've seen it all, not from the perspective of the one hurting, but from the perspective of someone far enough away to see clearly. There's one thing I want to say straight before I end. Understanding what's going on inside them doesn't mean you have to forgive. It doesn't mean you have to empathize. It doesn't mean what they did to you becomes less real, less painful, or less worthy of acknowledgement. It just means you no longer have to carry that question with you. The 2 a.m. question. The question you've read countless articles about, watched countless videos about, and still haven't found a satisfactory answer to. Now you have the answer. What you take away from this video isn't knowledge about them. What you take away is clarity about yourself, about what you gave, why you gave it, and why it's not a weakness but the best thing you have. Empaths don't love the wrong person. Empaths love the right person with the wrong person. And those are 2 very different things. If this video touches on something you haven't found a place to put down, comment below. No need to write long. 1 sentence is fine. I'll read it all.